Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Derek. Today I've got behind me a chop saw, abrasive chop saw with a 14-inch abrasive cutoff wheel, and then a cold cut saw or a dry cut saw. There's a few different names for it, but it has a steel carbide tooth cutting blade for cutting steel. Oh, and to make one thing clear, if you've ever seen that other Evolution video and you think Evolution sent the saw to me, they've been pretty much radio silent in talking to me since I did a video on that other saw, and they haven't sent me anything since. It's been years. So I paid for this with my own money. I'll stop talking, let's get into the video. All right, so let's get into the first claim that I'm making, or at least the first point, and we'll use this little piece of steel to help prove that point. Hopefully I do. Like I said, piece of pipe's not the best thing. If I was using a piece of angle iron, it'd be way more noticeable, and it still should be noticeable in this case as well. All right, my first claim is that you're gonna get way faster cuts out of this saw blade. I think that's one of the big things, is that you're just gonna save time all the way around from a number of different things I'll talk about. But the first thing is just that it cuts faster. All right, so here is our first cut with the cold cut saw. Being able to hold these brings up a point that I don't think I actually have on my list of points to make about them. I did have to pick this up off the ground. It's probably been, I don't know, 20 seconds since I made that cut. And the steel is just barely warmer where the cut was made than the back, even on the teeny tiny little piece here, this little ring that's left over. I'm going to make sure to show you that this side is the side that I cut with the cold cut saw, and then I'm going to cut this side with the chop saw, and that'll give us another difference that you'll see. Okay, so I'm grabbing the side of this pipe that was not cut, that was actually cut with the cold cut saw. As I move my fingers closer, it's definitely a lot hotter there. Yeah, the little ring is too hot to touch right now. So that's one of the big differences in the cold versus dry cutting saw, is that your work pieces after you cut them are way cooler after the dry cut saw. That's one huge advantage for immediately working with them. So if you're working with smaller pieces like you really often are when you're just doing like general fabrication work, it's definitely more handy to have this in that sense. The other thing is that I haven't done anything to these cuts. This is the cold cut saw. Notice how much fewer burrs there are than the dry cut saw. On the dry cut saw, we have all these burrs here on the end that all have to be cleaned off on the inside. All right, so getting to our next point here, basically the abrasive chop saw blades are way cheaper to pick up. I think you can get them like really cheap ones for about, more expensive ones for around the range. And so that is one sort of advantage to the abrasive chop saw, is just that it's a lot cheaper to buy new blades when you need them. But the reason why it's a sort of advantage, not so much, is because these are supposed to last a lot longer. By the time you're supposed to buy, 4 or 5 of the really good ones is about the amount of time that this will wear out. These are just rough estimates. Don't really quote me on them. And I don't exactly know how many abrasive chop saw blades are supposed to last versus the cold cut saws. But if you talk to anybody, and this is not based off my own, information, because this is a fairly new saw to me, and the blade is still quite new. It has been used very lightly for a couple small projects, I think. And the abrasive chop saws I've been using for years now. But these don't last that long, and it kind of might depend on when you chuck them, because sometimes I let them go pretty small. Like this one has lost probably a couple of inches already. Some people would probably get rid of that by now, where I usually, because I'm not cutting like huge pieces of steel all the time, probably let them go a little bit longer. So it's really just going to depend, but I think generally overall the idea is that these are supposed to last longer and save you more money over time by buying these blades versus these blades. It just depends on how well you take care of these and how careful you are just in general with them. So speaking of the cost of owning these things, just to talk about buying them in general, what I ended up paying was somewhere around the $300 mark on this chop saw. And then on this chop saw, I actually did have this sent to me by Harbor Freight, but I think it's around like the $169, so like $170 price point. So it's almost double to buy a cold cut saw. So it does cost more up front to get one of these rather than one of the abrasive chop saws. So keep that in mind. But again, which one you buy with them really is going to depend on your purpose, and that is something we'll get into in a little bit. All right, so I think our next point is best made with me behind the camera, okay? So basically what this next point is about is the accuracy of the cuts. And a lot of people will definitely back this up if you watch other videos based on this stuff. And I can tell you this is absolutely true from experience. When you're trying to fabricate and you're using a abrasive chop saw like this, these blades tend to deflect. They have some flex in them, and they tend to have anywhere from like an 1/8 inch to roughly, I don't know, probably as bad as 3/8 inch inaccuracies at times. So that's just something to keep in mind. They are in no way, shape, or form as accurate as these. These are very, very precise. They're going to cut exactly where you put them, and there's going to be no deflection in these saw blades here. They're very, very accurate and much more pleasant to use in general. So just know that this isn't the Hercules chop saw. I had a Milwaukee chop saw before the Hercules, and it had the exact same problem. It is just a problem with all abrasive chop saws. I do, for the record, really like the Hercules chop saw. I sold my Milwaukee because I liked the Hercules better. So this is in no way, shape, or form a downer on the Hercules. It's chop saws in general, but they do have their place, and we'll get to that. So just to clarify, this is a 14 gauge piece of steel here. On the gauge, it's right where it fits, so it is 14 gauge. So I know people like to see tools in action, and so I'm gonna go ahead and set this up again and make a couple more cuts. So pretty much my final points here is just what these chop saws are good for. In my mind, this is the superior fabrication saw. So if you're into metal fabrication, you're going to want to pick up one of these cold cut saws, and they are by far the superior tool for that kind of work. Again, as I was saying. Now the abrasive chop saws, I think, definitely have their place. If you do a lot of metal working where accurate cuts isn't quite so necessary, like rebar work, I think that this is the right tool if you need to you know, maybe do a little bit bigger rebar, a little bit more rebar work than you would maybe want to just do with like an angle grinder or something. I do think that these kind of saws have a place, right? I know that my grandpa's been using chop saws for years and years and years on his ranch. He's fabricated with them for my entire life and still does to this day. So it's definitely a cheaper option for fabrication, but you're definitely not going to get really nice, accurate cuts out of it. This is definitely the tool for that. And let's talk about two other small points that I just thought of as I was talking through this. One issue with this blade getting shorter is that it limits the amount of the thickness of steel that you can cut, where with the cold cut saw blades, this saw's entire life is spent at exactly 14 inches. So you do lose thickness capability with the chop saw a little bit over time. But these abrasive chop saw blades actually do last a surprisingly good amount of time. If you want to pick up either of these chop saws, there will be a link in the description below. You can buy them from those links, and I will get a small commission, at least off of this one. And one last final little thing to add to the end of that is you might notice that this makes a much bigger mess. You're losing abrasive dust and metal all at the same time, and it makes quite a bit bigger mess where you're just losing little metal chips like what's here on my finger that you probably can't see, and no blade. So it is a little bit cleaner to do. Anyway guys, appreciate you watching. If you haven't given this video a thumbs up already, go down, hit the thumbs up button, and if you're not a subscriber, definitely hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.